love's gone behind. Once I love and it was divine. Soon found out I was losing my mind. Seemed that the real thing, but I was so blind. Much mistrust, love's gone behind. In between, what I find is pleasing and I feel it fine. Love is so confusing, there's no peace of mind. If I fear I'm losing you, it's just no good. You tease me like this.
You want to know how mad I am at the United States of America? I'll tell you how mad I am at the United States of America. I'm not even picking a song today from the top of the U.S. singles charts. Okay, America? So take that. You take your tariffs and you take that as well. This song that starts our show today was a number one on the UK singles charts because that's the U that I like better today. Okay? Sorry, US of A. It was a number one on the UK singles charts for Blondie. Song called Heart of Glass. First of 5 UK number ones for Blondie from their third studio album called Parallel Lines. Here's a little bit of trivia about Heart of Glass. It was originally recorded in 1975 under the name Once I Had a Love, but it comes back in 79 as Heart of Glass, and it is a number one hit in the UK for Blondie. And we use that to begin our show today, this Monday morning, the 3rd of February. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here. Gosh darn it, I missed you. I hope you've been well. I was away traveling the highways and byways of northern Ontario and western Michigan with the Kitchener Rangers over much of the last week. It was a successful road trip, although it ended on a losing note on Saturday, but Kitchener picked up 4 of 6 points. We battled some weather. We had some fun. We're back in the on-air chair this morning, and I was able to share with you how upset I am with the United States. I know you are also upset, but could we please, if I could ask you a favor, can we just stop booing the national anthem at sporting events, the U.S. anthem, that is? It makes us look like losers. Don't do that. This is a Donald Trump thing, okay? It's not an American cousin thing, so stop it. Don't boo the anthem, you dum-dum. Stop it, okay? I know I'm starting back in after a few days away with a big request, but I really don't think it's that big. Stop booing the U.S. anthem at sporting events. It makes you sound dumb, and it makes you look like a loser. Don't do that, okay? We don't want to be dumb. We don't want to be losers, so let's just not. How's that? I couldn't believe my ears when I was driving to work today, and I'm listening to All News Mornings with Christine Clark and Mark Douglas, as I usually do, and they talked about the Roll Up the Rim to Win contest coming back at Tim's and how the Cups are going to come back, which I'm kind of happy for because we did too much on the phone, right? Too much on the phone. So let's just roll up our rim and have some fun with that. But then, much to my surprise and dismay, I heard the diss of the Tim Hortons coffee. I'm like, hang on a second. Like, just back that truck up a little bit here. I know everybody likes to pick on the company that's on top here. And yes, I know from its iconic roots and its importance to us as Canadians in our culture, it's now some Brazilian company. I get it that owns it, but come on. Tim's makes a fine cup of coffee. It's not like street side cafe with a baguette in Paris coffee, but what is? Tim Hortons makes a fine cup of coffee. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you who doesn't make a fine cup of coffee. That place that you go to for the mocha, choca, toca, chino thing. Somebody convinced you along the way that you needed a flat white in your life. I'm here to tell you that you do not need a flat white, whatever the hell that is, in your life. You just need a good old-fashioned cup of coffee. Pour it black like my soul and enjoy it. And Tim's makes something just for that. If you're not buying Tim's, you're buying a lifestyle. And you are paying with your life for it. I just thought I'd point that out. Bring some balance here to the coverage today. Diss my Tim's. And by the way, Colin Robertson, the guy on the other side of the glass today, brought me a Tim's this morning. Who's having a better day than me? All right, let's get to your Farwell Show 5 for this Monday morning. Number 1, yesterday was Groundhog Day. Tomorrow is Tariff Tuesday. Why? Because U.S. President Donald Trump says so.
Well, it could happen. If they do anything, we will. Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years.
Yes, very abusive. We boo your national anthem now, too. Very abusive, those of us here in Canada. The 25% tariff on virtually all goods from Canada takes effect tomorrow. Number 2, Canada not taking this tariff threat lying down. As Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced last night, we'll be swinging back with some stiff tariffs of our own.
Canada has critical minerals, reliable and affordable energy, stable democratic institutions, shared values, and the natural resources you need. I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives. I'm sure many of you are anxious, but I want you to know we are all in this together. The Canadian government, Canadian businesses, Canadian organized labor, Canadian civil society, Canada's premiers, and tens of millions of Canadians from coast to coast to coast are aligned and united. This is Team Canada at its best.
I don't know about you, but I'm ready to go burn down the White House again. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Ontario PC Party leader Doug Ford delivered his message directly to Americans last night during an appearance on CNN.
Well, we'll have retaliatory measures. It's unfortunate. We don't want to do it. We'd rather have a strong trading partner with the U.S., build an AMCAN fortress. We want to ship down more products, more critical minerals, more oil. That's what we want to do. But I can assure you what President Trump underestimates, the resilience of the Canadian people, the strength of the Canadian people. No matter what political stripe you come from in Canada, we're united. We're a united country, and we're a proud country.
Ontario Green Party leader Mike Schreiner and Ontario Liberal Party leader Bonnie Crombie will join this show this morning between 9:30 and 10. Number 4 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Ontario, one of several provinces pulling American goods from liquor stores in response to the tariffs, removing almost $1 billion worth of American wine, beer, and spirits sold at the LCBO. BC, Quebec, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland and Labrador all made the same move over the weekend. Ontario is also making American companies ineligible for provincial contracts here in Ontario. And number 5, all eyes at the Grammy Awards were on whether the most nominated artist in the history of the telecast would finally walk away with the coveted Album of the Year trophy. And she did, as Beyoncé won for Cowboy Carter. I'll take albums I've never heard of for 500, Alex. That capped a night that turned into a tribute to a suffering Los Angeles, with city firefighters chosen to reveal the winner of the last award and speeches offering words of encouragement for communities devastated. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Monday morning. I know how you're feeling. We're 24 hours from Tariff Tuesday. Well, maybe you want to tell me how you're feeling. Are you ready for the tariffs? Are you ready for a trade war? Because I'm here to promise you one thing. Ain't nobody wins a trade war. Would love to hear from you right after this on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio. See, I knew you'd have ideas. I got a few of my own, too, when it comes to tariffs and how we respond to them. John sends an email to Mike at 570news.com. says, Mike, should we just convince Canadians for only 2 weeks to not even go into Costco, Home Depot, or Walmart? If those stores were empty, it would send a message. That's John's email to Mike at 570news.com. How do you think we should respond? How will you personally respond to the tariffs? 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. We'll go to the phones this morning. Margaret, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Listen,
Good.
I was thinking about you all week long. I missed you last week, and thinking about you when you were on the road in the States on February 1st. And I did think, wow, this is a historic moment, really, for you to be there whenever those were first announced. But I want to totally agree with you that, it's in the words of Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go high. Let's not boo the national anthem. You know that the clips of that were played on every single U.S. mega show, Fox News, etc. And that's the kind of thing that we should not be doing right now. Let's be serious about this. This is serious. This is a threat to our sovereignty. The tariffs are one thing; they're a huge thing. But I go back to my grade 13 history class many, many, many years ago. I won't tell you how long ago, Mike, but my geography teacher in grade 13 said to all of us, "Mark my words, in your time, the U.S. will come after us for our water and resources." And I think that truly that is the scarier part, the bigger picture. Yes, they will do it through tariffs, but honestly, we really need to hold on to who we are and keep our eyes on that piece and really fight for Canada. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Marg. That's really well said. I appreciate the call and the sentiments there. And I appreciate that you were thinking of me while I was gone. It was interesting to be crossing over into the United States as we did last week after playing in Sault Ste. Marie on Wednesday. By Thursday, not only had we found spring, by the way, it was minus $1 billion in Sault Ste. Marie last Wednesday when we were there. And then Thursday, we hit the road and traveled down to Flint. And by the time we stopped for lunch on the way, it was like springtime outside. Remarkable difference in the weather. But it wasn't lost on us that we were traveling into the United States of God bless America just as these tariffs were to be implemented. They didn't happen on Saturday the 1st, of course, but they will, we are told, take effect tomorrow. And Canada is clapping back with more than $150 billion in tariffs of our own. But let me go back for a moment here to what John said in his email about not even going into these big box retailers that are American owned. And I get it. I get the sentiment. I, like you, have seen what's circulating online about buying Canadian, the website that's been created to help us find those things that are made in Canada, and let's support those companies. And I get it. I've always been a big fan of shop local. I would much rather put the money into the pocket of somebody who lives in my neighborhood and supports my neighborhood than into a big box retailer. But let's remember this. Let's use as just one example, because I think it's pretty near and dear to hearts in this community, Frito-Lay in Cambridge, which is a long-standing business that has employed many of our neighbors for a long time. Let's just suppose for a second that we did want to just buy Canadian and made in Canada, and we stopped buying Lay's potato chips. And we did it with such impact that Lay's realized, we can't keep that plant in Cambridge open anymore. Well, what happens to those hundreds of people who are our neighbors and are paying mortgages with the wages they are earning from Frito-Lay in Cambridge? Just as one small example. Yeah, you could not go into those Costco's or Home Depots or Walmarts, as John suggests in his email. And if we were to do it in great enough number, and it were to have an impact, such that the store is no longer viable for the company owner, what happens to all of the people who live in our neighborhoods who are working in those stores today? And if you'll forgive my cynicism, I've been around this business long enough to remember I think it was one of the first. We were going to boycott gasoline from a particular gas station. This was going to teach the oil companies a lesson. On one day, we were all going to boycott gas from this particular gas station so that they would get the message about how angry we were. So I was a young reporter, and I was sent to that particular gas station to talk to people who actually still showed up to buy the gas. Well, didn't you hear about the boycott? Well, yeah, but I needed gas, and this was the station on my way to work. I'm sorry, but I doubt our abilities to collectively affect enough change in this regard. But shop local. It's always a great starting point. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just ahead of our 9:30 update in the 570 News Center. Let's go back to the phones. Rick, good morning.
Good morning, buddy. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. And you?
Good. Fine, thanks. Big road trip. Big game tomorrow night. Tuesday,
Huge
right?
game tomorrow night. Holy Hannah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'll have the radio on. We're calling for a friend. On this one. We were away with the guys. We were on a trip, and boy, oh boy, we got talking about the trade wars and everything. And one thing came up was, and if Ford's on TV in the States, he's got to dummy it down. He's got to dummy it down to the people and say, look, there's no TVs hardly made in the United States. All the TVs come from offshore. They're all going to get slapped with a tariff. So who's going to pay for that? It's going to be you. You're sitting in your living room. You're going to have to pay more for that $1,000 TV. You have to pay $1,500 for your TV now. And the other thing, isotopes. Stop the flow of isotopes. Kind of dirty, but you know what? It's kind of a dirty sandbox we're in. Anyway, call him for a friend, and we'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, Rick. I appreciate the call from you or on behalf of a friend. I'll just go back to what I said a moment ago. Ain't nobody wins in a trade war. Yep, United States consumers are going to feel it too. Let's get you to the 570 News Center for that aforementioned update. And then Ontario Green Party leader Mike Schreiner joins us to talk tariffs and the upcoming provincial election. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It is, without question, the biggest story of the day. We are into the day before the tariffs begin, a 25% imposition of tariffs on virtually all Canadian goods by U.S. President Donald Trump. Canada has promised to slap back with more than $150 billion in tariffs of our own. Mike Schreiner is the leader of the Ontario Green Party and joins us for a conversation. Mr. Schreiner, good morning.
Hey, Mike. Good morning. It's always a pleasure to join you.
It's always a pleasure to have you on the show and get your perspective on things, particularly on this very big day. How would you propose, Mr. Schreiner, that Ontario respond to these tariffs from the United States?
Well, first of all, Mike, I would say we shouldn't be having this irresponsible election when we should be working across party, jurisdictional, and sectoral lines to show strength through unity to push back against these tariffs. I just think it's so selfish of the Premier to play politics with tariffs at a time when we need to be united. I was pleased to hear this morning that the Premier has positively responded to our recommendation to have a Buy Ontario plan for all Ontario government contracts. I'm glad he finally recognized that this irresponsible Starlink contract with Elon Musk was the wrong move by the Premier, and he's going to cancel that. And one of the things, Mike, I'm going to be talking about today is how this trade war is going to make the housing crisis even worse. Right now in Ontario, housing starts are at historic lows, housing prices are at historic highs, and construction experts and industry experts came out over the weekend saying the trade war is only going to make that worse. That's why I'll be proposing a first-time homebuyers plan today, because we cannot allow a whole generation of young people to not have the ability to be able to buy and own a home they can afford.
How will the trade wars make housing more difficult to obtain?
Well, industry experts are saying that there are billions of dollars in trade and construction materials back and forth between the U.S. and Canada. We buy $3.5 billion worth of glass alone that's used in the construction industry. That's going to increase costs. So one of the things I'm going to be proposing today is that we remove fees and taxes on homes built within existing urban boundaries under 2,000 square feet, so we can build starter homes that people can afford and address this housing crisis that's only gotten worse since Doug Ford took office.
Speaking of removing things, Mr. Schreiner, in light of this trade war that we're about to enter with the United States, would you be willing to engage in any conversations to remove the barriers to interprovincial trade?
100%, Mike. That's part of our plan. In addition to removing interprovincial trade barriers, I'm calling on the government to bring in an investment tax credit to unlock business investment in Ontario, which even the threat of tariffs has frozen investment, which then directly relates to jobs for people. And we also need to create a Protect Ontario fund for businesses that are disproportionately impacted by the tariffs and to make investments to really rebuild our local supply chains and aggressively diversify our trading partners.
Is this something that the province should look at permanently or only in response to these tariffs by the United States? In other words, are we better off as friendly trading partners, or are we better off being a little bit more protectionist?
Well, I think when it comes to interprovincial trade barriers, like, now's the time to do it, Mike. We've been talking about this for decades in Canada. So, you know what? Let's unlock those trade barriers. And when it comes to dealing with the U.S., we want to be friendly trade partners with the U.S. It benefits the Canadian economy. And so, when you see things like this trade war affecting our housing market in a negative way, when we're in a housing crisis, it shows that, we need to have a response. We need to have a strong response, but we also need to keep our eye on the fact that housing's unaffordable. Access to health care our healthcare system is crumbling. We have schools with overcrowded classrooms. And I would say to the Premier, you know what? You've got to do your job as Premier. You've abandoned people in this province by failing to address housing, health care, and education. And now you've abandoned your post as Premier at a time when we should be working across party lines to show a united front against Donald Trump.
You highlight three things there, Mr. Schreiner, in housing, education, and healthcare that I would, if I'm reading between the lines, suggest you think this election is about. But I think the message that we've been getting is that the election is about fighting the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. Which is it?
Well, I think this election is about a referendum on Doug Ford's failure to invest in the things that people in Ontario desperately need. Homes they can afford, access to health care services, not being in overcrowded classrooms, not having the places we love attacked by the Ford government. Unfortunately, the Premier wants to play politics with tariffs. Like, this is a serious issue, Mike. We should not be in an election. As a matter of fact, we should be recalling the Ontario legislature this week to have an all-party response to Trump's tariffs. But unfortunately, we can't recall the legislature because the Premier has put his own job ahead of your job.
You mentioned at the outset that you believe this to be an irresponsible election. Why do you say that?
Well, we're going to spend, $190 million, have an election a year and a half early. We're facing an unprecedented trade war initiated by our best friends to the south, and the Premier abandons his post. We can't even recall the Ontario legislature to pass legislation to respond. The Premier is playing politics with tariffs when you have 500,000 jobs at risk. Like, this is a moment, Mike, and the Ontario Greens have always talked about our commitment to working across party lines to put people first. This is a moment when that needs to happen, and the Premier has failed us in that regard.
Mr. Schreiner, we always appreciate your time on the show. Thank you very much for being here today.
Hey, my pleasure, Mike. And I just want to say to everyone out there, buy Canadian, buy Ontario.
It's a great reminder for all of us. Enjoy your day. Thanks again.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Mike Schreiner is the leader of the Ontario Green Party. He joins us to share his perspective on what he believes to be an irresponsible election. And it's certainly a narrative that we have heard, right? While there is an incoming U.S. president who is doing what he promised to do, and that is impose these very stiff tariffs on Canada, we have a federal parliament that has been prorogued, and we are in the midst of a provincial election campaign. Who is minding the nest as the tariffs begin tomorrow? We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll have a conversation with the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party as we continue to talk tariffs and the provincial election here on the Mike Farwell Show this morning. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We have heard from you as U.S. tariffs loom. We've heard from the leader of the Ontario Green Party. Now, a conversation with the leader of the Ontario Liberals as Bonnie Crombie joins the show. Ms. Crombie, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure, and welcome to the region. I know you're busy here in the next little while.
I am. I'm going to give a keynote address to the Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, and I'm going to be outlining some of my response and some economic initiatives that I'll be proposing.
Let's begin our conversation this morning with the tariffs. It seems to be the story on everybody's mind. How do you feel about Ontario's response to the tariffs to date?
So I have said from the very beginning that this needs to be a Team Canada response. So I'm very pleased to see that several premiers have announced their plan in conjunction with the Prime Minister. We need to be united. In fact, even with the Premier, we all need to stand united. My fight is not with Doug Ford on this issue. My fight with him is on how vulnerable he has left our province, and that the basic supports are not in place for people at a time like this when they're feeling vulnerable and jobs are at risk.
What vulnerabilities are you seeing in our province right now?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. Well, first of all, we see that people are in fear of losing their jobs. They're struggling to make ends meet now. They're barely affording their rent, their groceries, and their cell phones, all within the same month. Our kids have lost the dream of owning a home. But more importantly, what I see is a chronically underfunded healthcare system, and that is something Doug Ford is also to blame for. That I know that there are, 250,000 people on wait lists for surgeries across the province, and there are tens of thousands of people in the Kitchener-Waterloo area that don't have a family doctor. 2.5 million in Ontario alone because of chronic underfunding. We know that the pressure on our hospitals are facing. We see it every day when we go in. We have to wait 10, 12 hours to get treated in a hospital because people don't have access to a family doctor. We saw in a town not too far away in Walkerton, Ontario, a couple of weeks ago, 1,000 people lining up to register for the one new family doctor that was coming into town. We saw seniors bundled up in parkas with their walkers and in wheelchairs, and yet moms with children wrapped up and in strollers bundled up with the hope of that one family doctor. This is a shocking visual because this is Doug Ford's Ontario. Doug Ford has failed to provide us with the basics. It's great to fly the flag and be on Team Canada along with all the other premiers, but let's be honest, things aren't good at home. When we don't have access to health care, our schools are overcrowded, people are worried about their jobs. He hasn't done enough to insulate us from this threat and diversify our economy.
You talk about healthcare being chronically underfunded, Ms. Crombie, and healthcare has been a topic of conversation on this show for quite some time. If the problem is that it's chronically underfunded, would your solution be just to put more money into it?
No, I think we need a very strategic, a tactical approach. My solution is to recruit, retain, attract, and train up 3,100 family doctors. and then hire nurses at the hospitals as well. But we've got to attract doctors back to family medicine. So many have left the profession. Others who have trained abroad have come back only to face obstacles like not being able to get into a residency program. I would double the number of med students in the residency programs. How many times have you heard, someone's son or daughter went to the UK or Poland or the Bahamas and couldn't come back to get a residency program? Then there are people who are foreign trained stuck in what's called the Practice Ready Ontario. Anyways, all that to say, we need to get more family doctors back. We need to train them and attract them to come back into family medicine. And I am going to even announce a program that will try and attract doctors who have gone across the border. Those who, maybe Canadians, but are practicing in Detroit or practicing in Buffalo or practicing elsewhere in upstate New York. Let's bring them back home, because our number one concern is healthcare. Yes, jobs. Yes, affordability, but we have to solve the basics for people.
Ontario is, in response to the U.S. tariffs, pulling about $1 billion worth of American booze off shelves at the LCBO. We learned just this morning that American companies will not be eligible for provincial contracts here in Ontario. How, Ms. Crombie, would you differently approach the tariff threat from the U.S.?
So I have a consistent approach. I think you need to stand tough in the face of a bully. You will have to push back when there's a bully, and Donald Trump is a bully. So yes, we would remove, Tennessee whiskey and Kentucky bourbon from the shelves and all those wines that people enjoy. But hey, there are great Ontario wines. There are great BC wines. I would also break down interprovincial barriers and opportunity to diversify our trading partners, the French wines, the Chilean wines. We needed to have diversified our economy and our trading partners, and I will be talking a lot about that. We needed to have invested in different sectors, not put all our eggs in one basket, not to mention I want to keep the OEM sector, the car manufacturing sector strong. But it's not the only one. Advanced manufacturing is important. IT, particularly Kitchener-Waterloo, we know how important IT is. Those are the kind of industries that need propping up, need stimulus, need investment, because they're job creators. And right now, we need to attract investment and create jobs. People are worried, and rightly so they should be, because this government has not protected jobs. They have not created jobs. Our unemployment rate is the highest it's been in a decade. And jobs are leaving the province. They're going to other provinces and they're going to U.S. states.
On the automotive front, would you continue to support Ontario's investments in the electrical vehicle industry?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would, because I want to keep our manufacturing, our car manufacturing, the OEM industry strong, the EV industry strong, but it's also at threat. Let's be honest, we don't know what the outcome will be with tariffs and what the policy south of the border will be. And that's why I'm suggesting we need to diversify a little bit. People will know or may remember I was mayor of the great city of Mississauga, and our economy was built on 4 pillars: advanced manufacturing, which includes, of course, auto and aerospace, life sciences, IT, and a strong financial community as well, finance, insurance, real estate. And they kept my city very, very insulated, and growth was strong. And I was able to attract investment, create jobs in those sectors. That's the kind of approach I would take. I wouldn't put all my eggs in just one basket. You're so strong in the IT sector in Kitchener-Waterloo. There has to be stimulus in that sector as well. It's a huge job creator, and let's be honest, those are the jobs of tomorrow.
Ms. Crombie, I appreciate your time on the show this morning. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me. More to come. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie Crombie, leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, joining us on the show this morning to talk tariffs, economic diversity, and her plan for the province. Now that we are, of course, into that election campaign, this is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. In case you were curious, having just heard from both the Ontario Greens and the Ontario Liberals, Ontario's NDP says it will defend jobs and people in the face of these 25% tariffs by partnering with Ontario employers and unions to protect jobs, working with trade-exposed industries, like automotive to provide direct support, promoting interprovincial cooperation and breaking down trade barriers, and launching a Buy Ontario campaign to promote Ontario goods. Very familiar themes from each of the opposition parties in Ontario, as the current party to lead the province ends American interests in provincial contracts and pulls booze from LCBO shelves. It is the day before the 25% tariffs take effect. I'll remind you that we will get a chance to talk about all of it. Noon to 1 today, rant or rave. You can get your tariff frustrations, if you will, off your chest. But right now, let's change gears. I mean, we know the tariffs are a threat. We've heard the responses to it, but what should this provincial election really be about anyway? We'll talk about that coming up next on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. It's all about the tariffs. Or it's the economy, stupid. Anyway, I bring up tariffs again because it is the talk. And it's the reason that Doug Ford said we needed this election in Ontario, because he needs the strong mandate in order to fight back against Donald Trump. But surely there are issues beyond the ever-present tariffs, aren't there? John Malloy is a former Liberal MPP and cabinet minister, and currently the director of the Centre for Public Ethics at Martin Luther University College, joins the show. John, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
You have a long enough memory, I think, to take us back to when Doug Ford was first elected in this province and made some promises around healthcare. Do you feel as though he's delivered on those?
I think healthcare is his Achilles heel in this election, but I also have to be realistic. Well, let's go back to 2018. He said that he would end hallway medicine. He said he would end hospital wait times. He made the claim that he would reach out to doctors and nurses and find out what's wrong with the healthcare system and fix it. And of course, as he was, people on all sides are praising his leadership on this, but while he was off doing interviews on Fox News and making bold statements about the tariffs, there were hundreds and hundreds of people lining up in Walkerton for the hope that they might be able to get a family doctor. So I think there's an issue that should be talked about in this election in terms of health care and Mr. Ford, but part of what spurred our conversation is a piece I wrote a few days ago, and good grief, the world has changed a lot in a few days. I don't know if anyone could talk about anything but tariffs. Certainly for the next week or so, I think that's all that's going to be on everyone's mind. But it is unfortunate because healthcare is such a big part of the provincial government. Ironically, tariffs aren't a big part of the provincial areas of responsibility.
Well, and that's exactly, John, why I wanted to have this conversation despite the piece you have written being several days old now, because there clearly is more. Look, we can multitask, and there are more issues than just the tariffs. Yes, they're looming. They're going to start tomorrow. We're fighting back, et cetera, et cetera. But healthcare is something that needs to be addressed in this province. We just heard from both Ontario Green Party leader Mike Schreiner and Ontario Liberal Party leader Bonnie Crombie. They both identified healthcare as an issue. I think the big question, though, is, and you would have plenty of experience in this regard from your time in cabinet here in Ontario, how do we even go about fixing a problem of this magnitude?
And that, I think, is the issue. I mean, there's an old political adage that you should talk about the problem more than the solution, which may seem counterintuitive, but when you talk about the problem, you kind of, first of all, get people's attention. People can kind of identify with you, and then when you do trot out solutions, and if some of them are even entail a bit of sacrifice, people are ready for it. But I think the problem with healthcare in Ontario, although you can point to shortage of family doctors and wait times and emergency rooms being crowded, I think the real problem is that politicians have been talking about how they're going to fix healthcare for decades and never seem to make much progress. Our healthcare budget grows at an astronomical rate. There was a report that came out from the Financial Accountability Officer of Ontario pointing out that over the next number of years, our healthcare budget is going to go up by billions and billions, and it's not enough. And the FAO put out, what should be invested in the healthcare system, which was billions of dollars more. And I can guarantee you, Mike, if the government was to find that additional money, there still would be huge lineups at emergency rooms and a shortage of family doctors. So I think what the problem is that people have just given up hope that politicians are going to solve it. And maybe politicians need to talk about this in a little bit of a different manner, and maybe they need to come out and admit that this is a huge problem. We have an aging population. We have the rise of things like mental health and addiction issues, and we might need to really shake up the system. I don't know. As a voter, I think if I heard a politician saying that would get my attention more than the old, we're gonna hire more doctors and we'll get rid of hallway medicine and we'll throw even more money at the system, because it's not working.
Is that really then to say, John, that the problem has been over-promising and under-delivering on the file? Definitely. And, you've seen healthcare, from the Conservative side, they haven't mentioned it in this election, and the opposition are mentioning it, but again, very much along the lines of what I said when I ran in 2003 in opposition. We'll solve all the problems. We'll let in more foreign trained doctors. We'll reduce wait times. We'll do this, that, and the other. We'll invest more. And you know what? All of that's important. And the opposition have some good points and some good policies. But at the end of the day, I don't think the average voter believes that if Merritt Stiles or Bonnie Crombie or Mike Schreiner were the premier, that the healthcare system would magically be transformed. I mean, it's a crisis out there, and I think it's something that's going to need some major overhauls. And, it's a scary thing to say. And, maybe the opposition parties or other parties are worried about turning off voters. But I just don't think voters have a lot of faith in any of the political parties to deliver on this. It is a scary thing to say. And I think that's why it's important that we have this conversation. And it's interesting that you make reference, John, to being in opposition and bringing in these foreign trained doctors, because Bonnie Crombie literally in the last 20 minutes said that very thing. If it wasn't working 20 years ago, why would we expect to work it today? Why would we expect it to work today? Pardon me. So it sounds like maybe it's time to just reimagine healthcare in this province. And that might be too difficult to put onto a campaign platform. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, I think the opposition, and, I'm not trying to take anything away from Bonnie Crombie or Merritt Stiles or Mike Schreiner. They have good ideas. I think they're worth considering. I think voters should be looking closely at their platforms and the promises they're making. But I just think this is maybe a little bit bigger than tinkering around the edges, and that's the real challenge right now, because we can't keep spending money on healthcare on the rate we do. I mean, it just is going up and up and up. And you know what? I want good healthcare. But when I'm 85 and go in for a treatment or what have you, that's going to cost tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where is that money coming from? That money is being taken away from investments that could be made in kids starting out in school or research and innovation, things that will have a really profound impact on the economy. And healthcare, it helps people, and in many cases, it allows them to be more productive members of the economy. But when you have older people, it's not the investment that's going to add to our future. I mean, it's a harsh thing to say, but it's the reality of the economics of it.
John, always appreciate your perspective on the show. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, Mike.
John Malloy is the director of the Center for Public Ethics at Martin Luther University College. His last comment there around what it would cost to provide the necessary health care to him at the age of 85, and that money coming from investments in early childhood education or other things in the economy reminds me of something John said I've never forgotten. As a cabinet minister, as a member of the Liberal government previously, in a room at a meeting, he was asked, if you had an extra dollar to invest in this province, where would you put that dollar? And, a lot of the answers might have been healthcare, but then what about education? What about, the automotive industry or the electric vehicle industry and building that up in the green, clean future, whatever the case may be? It's really, it comes down to choices. And I wanted to have this conversation because, yes, it's all about tariffs right now. It's very present. We're hearing from Donald Trump as he's boarding airplanes or deplaning. We're hearing from opposition party leaders. We're hearing from Doug Ford. Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. But just remember that aging population in this province, and I selfishly admit to being one of them, but I want to know that my health care, or as I call it, sick care system, is going to be there for me. And all of the people that are getting older every day, just like me. I really think this thing needs to be stripped down and rebuilt. We can do it better. We had a blue ribbon panel, for crying out loud, in Ontario to help us on the healthcare file. Is this election, or should this election really be about healthcare? Can we forget the tariffs for a moment? I don't think they're going to last anyway. Healthcare is critically important today and decades from now. Maybe that should be the main election issue. What do you think? 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
This is maybe a little bit bigger than tinkering around the edges, and we can't keep spending money on healthcare on the rate we do. I mean, it just is going up and up and up. And you know what? I want good healthcare. It's not the investment that's going to add to our future. I mean, it's a harsh thing to say, but it's the reality of the economics of it.
John Malloy is a former cabinet minister and MPP for Kitchener Centre with the Liberal Party here in Ontario. He's now the director of the Centre for Public Ethics at Martin Luther University College. And he joins us to talk about what he thinks might be getting missed in all of this tariff talk, and that is healthcare. And look, we talk about it on this show. I mentioned this with Bonnie Crombie in the previous half hour. It is a subject that comes up time and again. Wait times, the inability to find a family doctor, hallway medicine, if you will, where patients can't get rooms in hospitals because we are so overcrowded. Offload delays that hold up our ambulances because we can't get patients safely transferred from the paramedics to the care of hospital staff. There are so many problems, and I hate to sound so defeatist about it. I really do. But this is something that I think about a whole heck of a lot. And John Malloy has given some consideration to as well. He wrote about it, comes on the show this morning to talk about it. I know tariffs are the story of the day. But if we could strip that away for a moment, because I really don't believe, I said at the beginning of the show today, trade wars, there are no winners. I don't think this is going to last all that long. Remember when Donald Trump came to power in the United States back in 2016. We went through a similar exercise. It didn't last long. Will it last longer this time? I guess we will see. But tariffs only hurt. And maybe, can we call them taxes instead? That's what this is. This is Donald Trump, conservative / Republican, raising taxes on the American people. That's not exactly typical conservative / Republican behavior. But they're going to hurt the United States as much as they hurt Canadians. And this is just not good for anybody. So if we peel that away, and when the trade war ends, because it will, what's the issue in this election for you? 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. John Malloy points out in the piece that he wrote that led to our conversation this morning, that when Doug Ford came to power in Ontario in 2018, he promised that it would be the end of hallway medicine. He would also cut hospital wait times. And unfortunately, that has not happened. In fact, things have only gotten worse when it comes to getting care in the hallway of a hospital, waiting when you're in an emergency room, not having access. And you heard Bonnie Crombie share these numbers a moment ago. 2.5 million Ontarians do not have access to a family doctor. And so we're going to have opposition parties pledging to make things better by hiring more foreign trained physicians, hiring more nurses, all these different things. But we've heard these things before, and sadly, they have not turned out to be effective solutions. And now we have got a rapidly aging population and a healthcare system that seems to be deteriorating at a similar pace. Let's go to the phones here from you. Greg, good morning.
Hey, Mike, brother, how you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. You missing your motorcycle?
Oh, my gosh. Like you wouldn't believe, my man. Like you would not believe.
I hear you. Winter sucks. Listen, I appreciate the question today. Listen, it's simple as this. What's up thinking about Dougie in the election? How about all the corruption? I don't care whether you want to be conservative or liberal or anything else. You got to look at the Greenbelt scandal, Ontario Place, the debacle of moving the drag call centers, the Staples on a sole source, and an absolute massive list of other issues. This slug has got to go. He's costing us money, and at the end of the day, that's what this should be about. It's all about personal greed with Dougie. And so let's get past that and vote him out.
Greg, appreciate the call and the reference to Doug and the Slugs, great Canadian band. And that's fair. Absolutely fair. You want to talk about cynicism? This fuels it, right? When you see or when it appears as though somebody may be in it, politics, for themselves. Tom, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
What's this election about for you?
Well, it's got to be health care. And please don't start everything over. Just add the money.
Well, see, I don't know about that. You just want to throw more money at it? It ain't working, Thomas. It's not working.
Sure, it's working, because if they do the study, it's going to cost you billions. But the reason I'm saying, like, KW or St. Mary's, they only have one doctor on call. They've asked for an extra doctor, which would decrease the wait time. They won't give it to them. Doug Ford is corrupt. Like, look at the Greenbelt. Look at the Science Center. There's nothing wrong with the Science Center, but he wants to rebuild. So,
all right. Listen, the same thing that Greg says, it comes down to the personality of the person in charge, their behavior. That's the most important thing. Find somebody, I suppose, then, in that light, that you can trust. Tom's solution to healthcare, by the way, is just pouring more money into it. I'm sorry to disagree, but I do. I think there needs to be a reimagining here, and I'm not going to claim to sit here and have the answers. But I think we've gone at this long enough with the same promises over and over again, and it hasn't worked. So maybe it's time to try something different. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. From tariffs to healthcare to maybe some other things we want to keep in mind before we cast that ballot in this upcoming provincial election. Let's continue our deep dive this Monday morning, right after this update from the 570 News Center. Stay with us on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. Well, we've talked about tariffs a lot, and we'll talk about them more, I am sure, during our open line rant or rave hour today from noon until 1. Set yourself a little alarm if you've got some tariff frustration you need to get off your chest, because you are welcome to do it during that hour. We've talked about healthcare, which we know is an ongoing, important issue in this province, and one that at least our guest John Malloy believes should be front and center in this election. Now, some other things that maybe you want to consider as you cast that ballot before the end of the month. And speaking of the end of the month, as I come back after a trip with the Kitchener Rangers, it is the first Monday of this month. And on the first Monday of the month, at this time, we are joined in studio by Kim Wilhelm, who is the CEO of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. So first and foremost, good morning and thank you for being here.
Good morning to you too. Always a pleasure, Mike.
Certainly some things that we can be thinking about over these next several weeks during the election campaign, helping us to have an informed vote when we cast that ballot. Let's start with food insecurity here in the region of Waterloo, Kim. Can you give us a sense of what that looks like and how many people are accessing food assistance right now?
Yeah. I mean, it's no secret to the listeners today that food insecurity has hit an all-time high. In 41 years of food banking here in Waterloo Region, the Food Bank of Waterloo Region has continued to see record-breaking numbers. And that's something that I would be happy never to say again is record-breaking numbers. But the reality is this fall, we saw record numbers of those who were accessing food assistance right here in our community. And to put that a little bit more tangibly, December, 23,000 adults, children access food assistance more than 42,000 times just in the month of December. And our partners are not only providing food hampers here locally, but also in the month of November provided over 104,000 community meals to those in need. And to put that into a little bit of perspective here, the numbers that we saw in December were about 25% higher than what we saw last December at the same time.
So what, Kim, is driving this need for food assistance?
Well, it's really a combination of factors that are causing people to access food assistance at alarming rates. Ongoing economic challenges, rising cost of living, critical shortage of affordable housing, food inflation, they're all making it harder for individuals and families to make ends meet at the end of the month. Many households are forced. They're stretched thin and they're forced to make tough choices every month between essentials like rent, mortgage, utilities, or groceries. And these are impossible choices that I say no one should ever have to make because food is a basic human right. Over the past year, we've seen the impact of these challenges firsthand right here in Waterloo Region. As I talked about, the visits to our food hamper program have increased over 25%. Over the course of a year, 558,000 visits to a local food hamper program, which is frankly just an astonishing number. And it really underscores just how deep of an issue we have here, not only in Waterloo Region, but in the province and right across the country as a whole.
You know, it's interesting. We were just chatting here in the studio as Matt Hutchison was finishing his news update and talked about being engaged and paying attention to what's going on. So I've heard these statistics before, the increasing demand, that 25% increase you mentioned in December, for example, Kim. We know that food insecurity has increased. And when I think about that and I absorb that, oftentimes I'll think about the work that you and the team at the Food Bank of Waterloo Region do. And I wonder, how on earth? So how on earth do you meet demand like this at the food bank?
Well, simply, we don't do it alone. It takes an incredible network of people to ensure that people are fed right here in Waterloo Region. And we refer to that network as our Community Food Assistance Network, which is a network of more than 130 food assistance programs that come together to ensure that people are fed. But those programs aren't just providing food, but they're trying to really provide other vital supports to individuals to wrap the support around them that they need. That support may be help with housing, could be mental health. It could be help to find job. There's so many things that ultimately bring someone to access food. We talk about food is often the gateway, but there's so many more reasons why somebody may need to access food. And so we're working together to ensure that if you need food, we will provide it. But we also want to try and figure out what that root cause is that's bringing you there so we can support you better off.
Kim Wilhelm is the CEO of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. She joins us in studio on the first Monday of every month at 10:30 just to keep us abreast of the need for food in our community, how the food bank is meeting that demand. And now that we are into an election campaign, maybe some things that we can all keep in mind when we choose a candidate when that vote happens on February the 27th. We'll take a break, come back with more with Kim Wilhelm, the CEO of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. How can we tie these statistics and this growing need for food in our community into our choice at the ballot box later on this month? We continue the conversation here on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Kim Wilhelm is the CEO of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. She joins us in studio every Monday, the first Monday of every month at 10:30 to talk about food insecurity in our community, how it's increasing, how the food bank is meeting that demand. And since we are into a provincial election now, Kim, the campaign is well underway. Party leaders tripping over themselves to get on the show earlier today. Let's focus and tie what the food bank is doing into this upcoming provincial election. What can voters keep in mind when they choose their preferred candidate later this month?
I mean, in short, it's really important for people to keep in mind the importance of food insecurity and how it impacts our entire community. It's essential for us to consider which candidates have a clear understanding of the challenges that are faced by those who are experiencing hunger and who are committed to addressing the root causes of hunger, because food insecurity, as I've said on the show before, is a symptom of poverty. A symptom of poverty when somebody doesn't have enough money to be able to afford food. So not only are we looking at, food security, but also some of the driving factors such as affordable housing, fair wages, access to social support programs. So I really encourage voters to look for candidates who are willing to advocate for policies that really are going to help us ensure long-term solutions to food insecurity. Take you back 41 years ago when the Food Bank of Waterloo Region started out. We were here to be a temporary measure. But here we are 41 years later, seeing record number results. So that policy that I talked about to address long-term solutions to food insecurity is so important.
Are there any specific commitments you would like to see candidates make that would better support those who are food insecure in our community?
Yeah, so keeping in mind the fact that poverty is the leading driver of food insecurity, there's some progress that we have seen a little bit in the province's poverty reduction strategy. But 1 million Ontarians are facing food insecurity last year. So what we'd really like to see candidates support is investments to increase the earned income exemption for Ontario Works. So right now, we'd like to see it go from $200 to $400, which would allow Ontario Works recipients to earn more without being subject to high tax clawbacks and provide them with a longer financial runway before exiting the program. We'd also like, talking about Ontario Works, we'd like to also adjust the Ontario Works rates to at least the 2018 levels of $883 to reflect the rising cost of living and tie further increases into inflation. This would really help us provide recipients with the necessary financial foundation to focus on securing stable employment as they exit the program. And finally, we want to build upon federal funding by investing $150 million to the Ontario Student Nutrition Program to bring Ontario to the national medium with the provincial contribution. So this funding would nearly double the number of students that could access a mid-morning meal at school and increase the percentage of Ontario students served by the program from 40 to 70%.
I know, Kim, that folks are really engaged in these issues. We hear about it an awful lot, these underlying root causes that you're talking about. How can these folks, as voters, find out where candidates stand on these issues related to food insecurity and poverty?
Voters can find out where candidates stand on issues related to food insecurity and poverty by really engaging with them directly. We encourage people to attend local debates, town halls, candidate forums where these topics are being discussed. It's also helpful to visit the candidate's website, social media pages. These are all resources where you can find out on their position of food insecurity and poverty-related issues. Additionally, our organization, our partner at Feed Ontario, has a number of tools available on their website to help voters better understand how candidates' policy may impact food insecurity. But ultimately, asking candidates directly during their canvassing or outreach is really a great way to become as informed as you can.
And as we get informed, a great way to exercise that information is by making the choice we make at the ballot box, which is great, gives us a little bit of power. But I know, too, this community is one that likes to roll up its sleeves, raise some barns, etc. What can we do besides making a choice at the ballot box to support your efforts and efforts to combat food insecurity in our community?
I can't say this enough, just how incredible Waterloo Region is and how the region continues to come together to help those in need. And if you're able to make a financial donation, that's an easy way for us to fill the gaps in our inventory and make sure that our food is delivered safely. And you can do that directly on our website at thefoodbank.ca, where you'll get an immediate tax receipt. If you're out at the grocery store and you have an ability to make an extra donation of food, think about things that are high in protein and low in sodium. At this time of year especially, some stews and chilies are very welcome items, and you can place those in the bin on your way out of the door. Volunteering is also a vital way to make a difference, whether it's sorting food in our distribution center, helping out at events, or assisting with deliveries. Every hour that somebody is able to support us helps our operations run smoothly. And finally, consider partnering with us, whether a business or a community group or an individual. Host a food drive if you can, or another fundraiser. It really makes a tremendous impact in the work that we do.
This election, Kim, is going to be here before we know it, before the end of the month on the 27th, so just a few weeks and a bit before we head to the polls. What message would you like to leave with folks listening today before they head to the polls at the end of the month?
Oh, that's a great question. I encourage them to think about the growing issue of food insecurity in our community. 1 in 8 households in Waterloo Region is making an impossible choice today. And it's whether to use your funds, use your paycheck to purchase one of those essential items like food, or whether to pay for your housing. And like I said, those are impossible choices that no one should have to make at a time when food insecurity has never been higher.
Always appreciate the work that you and the team at the Food Bank of Waterloo Region are doing, and certainly the time you make to come in here and have these conversations with us. So we'll look forward to the first Monday of March, and wish you a good February, and appreciate the information. Give us something to think about, some food for thought, you'll forgive the pun, before we go to the polls. Thanks for being here.
Have a good one.
You too. Kim Wilhelm is the CEO of the Food Bank of Waterloo Region. First Monday of every month at 10:30, she joins us to talk about food insecurity in our community, and with that election coming up, how we can better inform our vote when we head to the ballot box on the 27th. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I mentioned at the beginning of the show today that we really should stop booing the U.S. anthem at sporting events because it makes us look both uninformed, which is my nice way of saying dumb, and like losers. Like it's not the American people. It's their president, okay? But Dave doesn't like my take on this, sends an email to Mike at 570news.com. Not only should Canadians continue to boo the U.S. anthem, we should stop playing it at all. This is not just a Trump thing. It's an American thing. They voted Trump in knowing he was going to do what he is doing. Stop being a wimp and stand up to them. All right, Dave, if you say so, but I, again, disagree. I'll disagree respectfully. And I mean, you can call me a wimp if you want. I don't care much. It's not helping. And really, yes, U.S. voters did vote Trump in. I'm almost positive they didn't vote Trump in because they thought he was going to impose tariffs on Canadians. They voted Trump in because he was going to build a wall and remove illegal immigrants and end the woke agenda of the Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think there were many Americans. There may have been some, but I don't think there were many that voted for Donald Trump because he was going to start a trade war with his closest ally. Maybe just me. And really, again, booing the national anthem at a sporting event, the hell does that accomplish for anybody? And don't even get me started with stopping playing the anthem at all. Canadian or American, I like an anthem before a sporting event. If we can't spend 90 seconds to 2 minutes of our day being patriotic, thinking about the freedoms that we enjoy and why we enjoy them, we got some bigger problems than booing anthems then, don't we? So please keep the anthems and stop booing the U.S. anthem. That's my take on it. We're going to take a break from the political stuff for a bit. Again, lots of time between noon and 1 with our rant or rave hour to talk tariffs and how tough you want to be and how much of a wimp I am. I'm here for it. But after this update from the 570 News Center, because it's Monday, this week in music history and one of my favorite bands of all time is featured.
Isn't the right thing to do. How can I ever change things that I feel? If I could, maybe I'd give you my world. How can I, when you won't take it from me? You can go your own way.
Let it play. Let it play. If music be the food of love, play on every Monday morning, 11 o'clock. It's This Week in Music History with our fellow musicologist, Brian Allison, who joins the show. Brian, good morning.
Hi, Mike.
How are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm also great, especially because I got to use that particular piece of music for the intro to the segment this week. And usually I'll use the music and then tease that there's a reason that it's here, but I want to dive right into it because way back in the day, Brian, when I used to do music radio, the guy that I worked with, I would tell him every time we got to play a Fleetwood Mac song that they've never made a bad song, not even Tusk. Come on with your coming on. And it's a big week in music history for the band Fleetwood Mac.
I am not going to argue with you there. Fleetwood Mac, just an outstanding band. Put out so much great music over the years. But tomorrow marks the anniversary of the release of the biggest album, of course, which was Rumors. Came out on the 4th of February 1977. And a lot of stuff going on with this record. So, you know, if you know the background to the band, there were two relationships within the band that were simultaneously breaking up at the time the album was being made. Christine and John McVie and Lindsey Buckingham and the great
Stevie Nicks.
Stevie Nicks, thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and a lot of that went into the songwriting. And if you listen closely to the lyrics, you can hear there was a lot of breakup, heartbreak. That was sort of the theme of the record. It hit like a ton of bricks. I don't believe there'd ever, to that point, been an album that had quite hit that hard. It sold 1 million copies in America in its first month of release, which even in 1977, that was just an outstanding milestone to meet. 1 million copies of your LP in a month. People were running to the stores to buy Rumors. And it just went on. I mean, it rode a wave over years and years and years. Singles like Dreams, which went to number 1, Don't Stop, Go Your Own Way, You Make Love and Fun, all top 10 singles. You got Songbird, you got The Chain, which also charted. It was a monster, just a massive album. So it has earned status. It was Album of the Year at the Grammys. It was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, and it was selected for preservation in the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress, which is pretty outstanding. To date, Rumors has sold 40 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best albums of all time. Still a great listen. I still have an original, I think it belonged to an aunt and uncle vinyl copy of Rumors that I spin regularly in it. And it still sounds great. I mean, the mark of an amazing album to me is when you can listen to it some 40 years later and still feel, that it's a great record.
Yeah, it's not a bad listen no matter what. It holds up. It's one of my top 10 albums of all time. Absolute classic with Rumors. Okay, let's go from one album to another, and it's a pretty big week in music history for Def Leppard.
Oh, another bomb that was dropped. So, yeah, February 5th, 1983, Def Leppard, who was a band that was coming out of England. They were part of what was known as the Nawabum movement. That stands for New Wave of British Heavy Metal. So there's a lot of metal bands coming out of England at that time, and it was kind of a thing. People will argue that Def Leppard really wasn't part of quote-unquote heavy metal. They were more of a hard rock band, but you can discuss amongst yourselves. The album was produced by Mutt Lange, and Pyromania was released, and it started a 92-week run on the Billboard charts, which was pretty impressive for a relatively unknown band from England at that time. It never reached the top spot, but it sold 6 million copies in the U.S. alone. 21 years later, it has received rare diamond certification by the recording industry, and that means that it sold over 10 million copies total, which is another massive, massive album. Singles like Photograph, Rock of Ages, Foolin', they all charted and did very, very well. It pretty much, made Def Leppard's career. They have had certainly some great albums since. Hysteria was the follow-up a few years later, which was massive as well. But Pyromania just put them on the map. And again, another record that you can still spin today and say, wow, that still sounds like a great record.
I guess, Brian, we started this segment at the beginning of the new year, This Week in Music History, every Monday at 11 with you. And I guess you've been at long enough now that you're ready to become the controversial musicologist, because you're taking dead aim at NME magazine and its assertion that this song by a very big and popular band is not the best song of all time?
Well, let me qualify.
Okay.
So February the 6th, 2014, the British magazine NME comes out with a list, what they feel is their top 5 greatest songs of all time. Now, that to me is a pretty big assertion to make, to assert that these songs are the best songs ever. So if we go, if we look at the top spot, it was given to Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is obviously the song off of Nirvana's album Nevermind, released in 1991. Clearly a massive song, a massive album, great band. But I got to say, I don't think they got it right. I think Smells Like Teen Spirit is obviously a great song, a groundbreaking song, but best song of all time? I don't know about that. I'm not sure. Even the rest of the top 5, Last Night by the Strokes, How Soon Is Now by the Smiths. Okay, I might put that up there. I Feel Love, Donna Summer, and Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division. Yeah, I'm looking at that top 5 going, there might be one song in that group that maybe makes what I would consider to be top 5 songs of all time, but we could have a debate for several hours and talk about those choices.
We certainly could, and that's why they put out lists like that, just to get us talking about them and saying what our top 5 might be. Speaking of all time, I think that the Super Bowl changed forevermore for all time on This Week in Music History. And with the Super Bowl coming up, we'll talk about that. Also, some news on David Bowie and REM and why they stand out on This Week in Music History as we continue with Brian Allison, our musicologist, every Monday morning at this time on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every Monday morning at 11, musicologist Brian Allison joins us for a look back at This Week in Music History. And one of my favorite Bowie tunes, Brian, rears its head this week with Jean Genie.
Yeah, it made some big money for David Bowie's estate. So it was just 2 years ago on February 7th, the handwritten lyrics to the Jean Genie came up for auction. So Jean Genie was a song that David wrote, was included on the album Aladdin Sane, and it was released in 1972, reached number 2 in the UK chart, so a pretty big hit for David Bowie. So his handwritten lyrics went up for auction, and they were expected to, people were thinking maybe in the $10,000 range that they would auction out at. Sold for an astounding £57,000, which is about 102,000 Canadian. And it was the lyric sheet was written on a plain piece of paper, A4 line paper. It was titled, signed by David Bowie, and contained 18 lines of the song "The Jean Genie" that he had first written. So somebody was willing to part with $102,000 to get that. Obviously, a great piece of rock and roll memorabilia. I don't know that it set a record for handwritten lyrics. I know there's been quite a few other ones that have gone for bigger dollars than that. Certainly, some of the Beatles stuff has gone close to $500,000 and up. But it was certainly a big chunk of money at the time to put out for a handwritten lyric.
Yeah, I love stories like that. And you know, another band that every time I listen to them, I wonder why I don't listen to them more often, because they always satisfy, at least for me. And in this case, I'm thinking of REM.
To me, I this personal opinion, of course, I don't think REM's ever made a bad album. All of their records have been fantastic right from the get-go. And it started February 8th, 1981, this young band from Athens, Georgia, who had come together to play at somebody's birthday party. Somebody in their circle was having a birthday party, and they said, hey, let's strap on some instruments and play a few songs and see how that goes. It went pretty well, and they started to write songs together. And by early 1981, they thought, well, we should go in and record some of these in the studio. So they entered Bombay Studio in Georgia and recorded 3 tracks, Gardening at Night, Radio Free Europe, which went on to be a big hit, and Don't Go Back to Rockville. And it was pretty much uphill all the way from there. REM went on to become one of the best-selling bands of the 80s and 90s and beyond. Record sales of over 90 million albums worldwide. So just, you know, a really, they kind of came out of the gate and never turned back. They were originally a college band. People, you know, they were kind of one of the first alternative bands that were not played a lot on mainstream radio in their early days, mostly college radio stations, but that movement just grew and grew, and they just became this massive band. Note, this music freak, I'm still holding out hope for an REM reunion tour. I would love to see them again. I saw them back in 94. Or 95, and would love to get out and see that band again. So
I could get behind an idea like that. Absolutely. Maybe we could go together, Brian. Maybe we could.
Hey, you buy the tickets, I'll go. How about that?
I like the way you think. Maybe not, though. Okay, this is also the week in music history that the Super Bowl changed forever.
Yes, absolutely. 21st anniversary yesterday of, can I say Nipplegate on radio?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Okay.
You couldn't have said it in 2004, but now we can say Nipplegate. It's all fine now. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say it again, Nipplegate. Yep, 21 years ago yesterday. So I think most people will remember during the halftime show of the Super Bowl, Janet Jackson was performing with Justin Timberlake. They were supposed to do a part during Justin's song Rock Your Body where Justin reached over and tore a portion of Janet's upper top off. And his assertion is that it was just supposed to expose a very decorative brassiere that she was wearing. So during the number, when he reached over, he pulled the part off, and there was actually her breast exposed, which had a piercing on it, a very elaborate piercing. They both acted very surprised. The cameras cut away, and CBS was flooded with calls from angry viewers about this halftime entertainment, which was not suitable for children. It had been produced by MTV, and they went into damage control mode. Of course, both MTV and the artist Justin Timberlake came out and said that it was an accident. He coined the phrase wardrobe malfunction, which we all kind of went, really? Wardrobe malfunction? That's new. My personal take on it, again, I'm adding a lot of personal opinions this week. That's not like me. I always felt like it was a staged thing. I don't know about you.
100%.
I had trouble believing that it was an accidental thing. I didn't feel like their reaction to it was genuine. It seemed very rehearsed. I think it was done on purpose, but today they still assert that it was an accidental malfunction and was not meant to happen.
I remember very well, Brian. A good buddy of mine always threw a Super Bowl party, so we'd be getting together at his place and watching the game. And of course, it's halftime. And Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake were headlining the halftime show. So the guys are like, yeah, we could not possibly care less. So we were in the kitchen watching my buddy's hot dog rotisserie spin, because that's what guys do. Wow, look at that. The hot dog is being rotated. And then we heard these gasps from the other room where all the ladies were watching the halftime show. We missed it completely because we were watching hot dogs. That might be a metaphor for something. I don't know. But anyway.
I think in most situations, I probably would have joined you in watching the hot dogs. But I did watch that Super Bowl, and I remember it being a very brief sort of a flash, and looking at whoever was sitting next to me, I don't remember who it was. It could have been my late brother-in-law, just saying, like, did we just see Janet Jackson's boob? Like, did that happen? And he was like, yeah, I think it did.
Oh,
and
gosh.
Of course, it was just, it was like the news of the year almost. It was just a story that just got legs, and everybody was talking about Nipplegate. So, yeah, 21 years ago, hard to believe it's been that long.
It certainly is. At a different time, in a different world, we would be celebrating this week the birthday of one of the best that Canada ever had in Gord Downie.
So sad. Yep. So February 6th, 1964, the great Gord Downie was born. He would have been 61 years old this week. Still sad to think about the fact that we lost Gord, and, we lost the hip, too. We lost one of Canada's preeminent bands, one of the bands that all of us as Canadians collectively loved. I just think they're never... We've had some amazing artists in Canada, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like nobody was ever quite as beloved as the Tragically Hip. Everybody just seemed to like them. Even casual music fans, if you mentioned the Tragically Hip, they'd nod and go, yeah, the Hip, cool. So it's sad that we don't have Gord anymore, but we still celebrate the fact that he would have turned 61 today or this week and celebrate his birthday.
And next week,
happy birthday, Gord!
Happy birthday, Gord! Indeed. Next week, I get to make another long road trip with the Kitchener Rangers, which will take me through Kingston and Slush Puppy Place, where the Frontenac's play is on Tragically Hip Way in downtown Kingston, and I will pay tribute as I should.
Good call. Belated birthday to Gord then.
Exactly. Brian, it's always fun. I look forward to this every week, and that means I'm already looking forward to next week. Thanks for being here this morning.
Me too, Mike. I'll talk to you next Monday.
You betcha. Bye-bye.
Okay, see ya.
Brian Allison is our musicologist who joins us every Monday morning, 11 o'clock for This Week in Music History on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every Monday morning at 11 o'clock, we get to spend some time reflecting on this week in music history with musicologist Brian Allison, which I thoroughly enjoy, and based on your feedback, you're liking it too. Very happy to hear that. Sometimes we need a break from the heavier stuff. Also, every Monday morning at 11:30, David Drewe joins us for Drewe's Views, bringing his unique perspective on most things political. And about that 51st state thing. We'll talk about that and more with David Drewe as the Mike Farwell Show continues this morning. 570 News Radio.
Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? I haven't seen hide nor shaggy head of that boy in 4 years. But you'd know him if you met him. Played harmonica like the cat lost his balls. Yep, Crazy Dave. Had a toothy smile as big as my hand. Always chewed on a toothpick or a long blade of grass, drank from the bottle, rolled the worst cigarettes, was impervious to insect bites. It's one of the best damn tree-planting highballers east of Prince George.
East of Prince George. What is not east of Prince George? Very little. That's pretty west British Columbia.
I was going to say there's a fair amount of Pacific Ocean.
Yes, that there is. David Drewe owns Negotiating Change, Government Relations, Stakeholder Engagement Strategies. He joins us every Monday morning, 11:30, for Drewe's Views.
And don't think I missed that fat joke you made about me.
What?
You just, on the bumper for the break, you were talking about we needed to break from the heavy stuff, and next we'll have David Drewe.
No.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, Mr. Farwell. Way to body shame.
The break from the heavy
I don't need
stuff
this bullying.
Was this week in music history. Don't make me come over there. I'll pop you right in the nose, pal. Right in the nose, you want bullying. Let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about the 51st state. I, for one, thought initially it was a joke. I, for two, am exhausted by it. And speaking of people that I'd like to bop in the nose, the President of the United States. This has got to stop, David. This has got to stop.
Do you think if you punched him in the nose, you'd have like all sorts of orange dye left on your knuckle?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah, I am really not that stressed yet about the 51st state talk. But I hear people throwing up these reasons as to why we don't have to worry about it. And I'm like, well, no, that's not really a good reason to not worry about it. So I just want to throw some of this. I'm not worried about it. But people say, well, he'd never do that because he won't have time. Just, he'd have to pass the constitutional amendment in the U.S. And, well, it could be done in 4 years, but who says he's only around for 4? Because he's already been making those noises too. If the chips start to fall, then this becomes a little bit more realistic. The next one thing people are saying is, well, if they annexed Canada, they'd have Democrats in forever. Well, if we are the 51st state, we get 2 senators only. We get rep by pop on Congress. But mainly, do you think Donald Trump cares? Do you think that he cares about who's in power after him? He cares about his own darn legacy, and if he can get the entire map with the stars and stripes across it of North America, he'll be remembered forever. They're going to have to put his face on Mount Rushmore. It doesn't matter if the Democrats are in power forever and ever after that. He won't care because he's got a legacy that will never be topped by any other president. So I think it's a very complicated thing. I think, there's going to be a whole lot of winners and losers because short of a military invasion, it's a deal. And if it's a deal, I don't know that, a lot of Americans would want Canada to join for various reasons. If you're in a protected state where, Canadian beer coming across the border, well, maybe you don't want that competition. There's going to be winners and losers in all of this. What are we going to do with the dollar adjustments? There's a million technical reasons where the closer we get to this, the less attractive it's going to be to America. But the idea that, well, he'd never do that because then the Democrats will be in power forever. I'm like, he'll just be saying, yeah, and that's evidence that I was in it for the right reasons. And we'll all be sitting here giggling. Like, there's just...
It sounds to me like you are entertaining this in more than just a passing way.
He's been talking about it too long. And I am not worried about it. But when you start talking about the stakes at that level, the question becomes, well, what do we have to put on the table to give him a walk away big enough where he can say, we did it. And this is the other challenge we have as Canadians, and this is a hilarious one. We have this entire talking head punditocracy, whatever you want to say, saying, oh, geez, and, we need to find a way to make Trump feel like he's won when we've actually won. So we can do it this way, or this way, or this way. And it's like, well, he might notice now that you just give the game away. But that is literally the position we are in. We have to find a way where Canadians will understand that we came out okay, but Donald Trump is going to be able to say he got an absolute victory. And with the cross-pollination of media, that's going to be a very, very hard thing to do.
Something tells me that Donald Trump will find a way to declare victory regardless of outcome. But maybe that's just me.
He didn't in the last 3 presidential elections.
Very fair point. A very fair point. Okay, so among the things that I have heard people talking about, along with the whole let's just, buy Canadian and become protectionist ourselves and this, that, and the other thing, there's also a lot of talk of, hey, let's not give them our tourism dollars. And I don't know how I feel about that. Whatever. I've got a concert tickets already booked for this summer before this happened. I got hockey tickets in April before any of this happened. But I'll tell you what really concerns me is how much it's going to cost me to go to the United States because our dollar stinks right now.
Well, our dollar is at the lowest point it's been in more than 20 years. And that is before the tariffs have kicked into effect. This is just speculation based on. It's going to drop more. And so all the goods we buy that come from America are going to be costing more before we put any punitive tariffs on them. So I want somebody to explain to me why we are doing this in a more nuanced argument than, well, what are we going to do? Nothing? He hit us. We have to hit him back. And it's like, well, yeah, he hit us, but he hit American consumers. He hit Canadian jobs and American consumers. And so in response, the Canadian government is going to hit American jobs and Canadian consumers. And in the meantime, Canadian consumers are also already getting hit by this lower dollar we have versus the greenback. If Donald Trump's goal is to make everything Americans buy more expensive, great. That's his prerogative as the president of the United States. But I do not understand why it is smart for our response to be, we're going to make it more expensive to buy American products. I don't understand why we say the producers are more important than the consumers in such a way all the time. And there was the one company out of Cambridge that was profiled nationally on the CBC last week, where they are looking at relocating to the U.S., the bulk of their value-add work, because of the tariffs, going both ways. Because of the inputs and the outputs, they're getting hit both ways crossing the border. They just can't afford to stay in Canada. And these are the types of companies that are going to go first. The ones where they have a footprint in Canada and a footprint in the U.S. We're not going to see jobs disappear and places close first, but we're going to see a whole lot of jobs being hired in the U.S. that might have been hired here. Then we're going to start seeing people being relocated. And it's this whole slow term. The auto plants? No, I don't picture the big auto plant in Cambridge leaving, but the balance of where all these auto parts, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, those parts across the border so many times, how many of those jobs might move across the border because they are a lot less sticky than the giant mega plants. So yeah, our low dollar is going to do more than enough to screw a lot of our job creators and our consumers. I don't understand how we win by making it more expensive for that dude who just got laid off from their job because of American tariffs to go and drown their sorrows in some Kentucky whiskey. Actually, you know what, though? That I think is fair, though. I think there's a difference between making stuff more expensive and just taking it off. You know what I mean? If you want to take Kentucky whiskey off, well, I can find an alternative very, very easy. But just putting tariffs on things, there's no way for the end consumer to know.
All right, before we take a break, we're going to get a provincial election out of the way, if you will, before the end of this month. We know a federal election is coming sooner rather than later. I would bet on May, but anyway, if you're Pierre Poilievre, how worried are you as the leader of the Conservative Party here in Canada with the blowback or fallout from what the Conservative/Republican leader in the United States, Donald Trump, is doing?
I'm not. I am worried in the sense of my carbon tax election messaging is nowhere near as sticky as it would have been without all of this tariff talk in the middle. But you gotta think, if there was going to be a blowback on Donald Trump or from Donald Trump on Pierre Poilievre, if it hasn't happened yet, what is going to cause it? And, I still hear these people saying, yeah, but once people see Donald Trump, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure we've seen Donald Trump. The glare and the glow from the sun that is his face is emblazoned in all of us. It's not going to happen anymore. He has nothing to worry about. They know it. But I'm still hearing people, it came up on the Friday 4 that, and once these things kick in, people are going to be seeing a lot more of Trumpism in Pierre Poilievre. And I'm like, why then? Versus why not when these were announced? Why not at this point? Why not at that point? What is going to happen in the future that will make us hit that point that people keep saying is going to save the Liberals? And I'm thinking that's not really a plan. That's hoping on double sixes.
David Drewe joins us every Monday morning, 11:30 for Drewe's Views. We should have seen this coming, right? Because of our management or mismanagement of the foreign policy file over the years. We'll talk about that and more as we continue this morning on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. If it's Monday morning and this time, it means David Drewe is sitting across the studio from me. Drewe's Views every Monday morning with David, who owns Negotiating Change, government relations, and stakeholder engagement strategies. If you were gazing into a crystal ball, would you have seen the current failure of our past foreign policy handling here in Canada?
Not this particular one. Like, that's just it. I think you can... I feel like I'm that guy who's standing on the side of the road saying, prepare for the end of the world.
You got the sign? I can see you.
But
the beard works perfectly. The beard,
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm not going to tell you how it's happening. So, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter whether it's tariffs from Trump but were we due for some sort of a reckoning? And one of the most respected poli-sci profs in Canada 4 years ago when the Globe and Mail was writing about this and kind of predicted this whole darn thing coming. Not again specifically the Trump tariffs, but when you have an, I don't know how to say this word, emaciated public service that has more bones than muscles and connective tissue, when you have an armed forces that are a shell of themselves, and when you really can just take your sovereignty for granted because of your geography and your one neighbor, we got complacent. And we allowed ourselves to take our place in the world and our success for granted. And now, it's being hit, but the 2% on military, that's not just a NATO thing. That is an emergency aid thing. That is our allies knowing we can count on us. I'm not going to name names, but while I was in Ottawa, I was talking with an armed forces friend and reminded that Canada, if we go to war, we have enough bullets for a week. I was told about a training exercise where the soldiers were holding sticks and yelling "bang."
Come on.
That was our reaction too when we heard it. A number of vehicles that are used as parts vehicles but are counted as vehicles we have for possible deployment. And we got caught in this with Ukraine, where they needed supplies and we didn't have really anything in the cupboard. So now we have this point where we've ignored our internal trade barriers. So our internal market is very inefficient. The U.S., by contrast, like we tariff them, they tariff us. It doesn't matter about dollar for dollar. Impact on the economy. Exports to the U.S. are a huger proportion of our economy than imports from the U.S. are. And their internal economy is just so huge that they could get into a trade war with the rest of the world. And I'm not saying they wouldn't feel it, but their internal economy is strong enough that they could handle it better than we can, for sure. But even the EU, I think, would be a bit challenged to handle it as well as the U.S. So we've been sitting here thinking 3 oceans and a friendly neighbor. We don't need to do nothing. And the 2 Michaels with China was a wake-up call. The oceans aren't as big as they used to be in today's world. And, 4 years ago, we had just finished the first Trump administration, and there were no guarantees that he was coming back. But something, we could have seen this coming, or something this catastrophic coming, and taken a million of the steps that we're taking anyway. If we'd taken them 4 years ago, they wouldn't be as expensive, and we'd be better prepared for whatever happens today.
Hindsight is, of course, 2020, but you raise a good point. This was written about several years ago by one of Canada's preeminent political scientists. Very interesting times. Okay, let's leave you on one more name. We talked about Pierre Poilievre. We've talked a lot about Donald Trump. What about Jagmeet Singh? What is the biggest problem facing the leader of the federal NDP right now?
Okay, his third biggest problem is his table is going to collapse because all of the options that are on it keep expanding. He's going to bring down the government at the first opportunity after he passes the throne speech, after the relief measures are passed for the tariff war, but before the end of March. That's the latest exact same position that he's had. And I'm saying this somewhat, Peter Julian is generally the talking head that gets sent out to the national things where they have one talking head from each party. And in a way, he's got the easiest job in the world because it doesn't matter what Jagmeet is saying any particular day. Julian's now at the point where he can point back 3 or 4 times and say, this is entirely consistent with what we've been saying. And then the next day, Jagmeet Singh flops, and Julian can come out again and say, here's 3 different points in the past where we've had this exact same position. It's entirely consistent. So that's his third biggest problem, is just all of these options. He's like a fish on the dock in the sun. He's flipping and flopping, but there's no direction here. It's really just trying to find water and no idea where it is. Second biggest problem, and I'm surprised with his martial arts training and everything that I'm going to say this, but I think you will understand this as a broadcaster, MC, a public speaker in general. I don't think he breathes well. I think his breathing patterns disrupt his ability to speak effectively. Sometimes when Justin Trudeau gets a little bit too into it, he gets a bit breathy. But I think with Jagmeet, he's a bit of a shallow breather sometimes, and so he, is chasing his words. And
all right, so the table isn't big enough. Mm-hmm. He's a shallow breather, and in the interest of time, I got to get you to the biggest problem.
Oh, he's lost. Like
lost the election already?
Yeah. He has no brand at all. Like, what are they about? And with Jack Layton, this is the comparison they always make. 4 elections it took Jack Layton to break 18%, but what he did, wow. But even when we weren't taking Jack Layton seriously, he was liked, he was known, and he had a brand. What is Jagmeet Singh's brand?
Fun fact, Jagmeet Singh was at the same hotel we were at in Sault Ste. Marie last week. I tried to find him. I couldn't. I would have loved to have the opportunity. Good morning, Mr. Singh. But what are you about?
No, that's just it, though. But what is his consistent brand? Because listeners out there right now, Pierre Poilievre, you're thinking something about him. Justin Trudeau, you're thinking something about him. What is it with Jagmeet Singh other than,
We'll leave you with that question to ponder as we thank David Drewe for his time. As always, good to see you, sir.
Great to be here.
David Drewe joins us for Drew's Views every Monday morning, 11:30 here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We have spent considerable time today talking tariffs because what other story is there in the world? Maybe you have a different story, or maybe you've got some pent-up tariff frustration you want to get off your chest. Rant or rave, the next hour belongs to you, so we can hear your thoughts on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage outside, or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
It is your daily Talkback Hour. We do it from noon until 1 every day. And in keeping with tradition on this program going back many years, Mondays are the rant or rave edition of your 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. You got something that's bugging you, you want to get it off your chest and onto the air? That's a rant, and you can do that during this hour. Or maybe you're feeling real good. Like we've reached February. The end is near, right? 6 more weeks of winter. You want to rave about something? You can do that too. 519-570-2545. Star 570, 1-800-570-5715. An email from Mike. I won't read it in its entirety because it's a long one. But tariffs, Trump, hit him hard. Stop pussyfooting around, says Mike to Mike at 570news.com. Cut off U.S. electricity, might I suggest, during the Super Bowl game next Sunday as the timing. Cut off the U.S. oil supply. Shut down the automotive supply chain in Ontario. Build our military up now and cut off crucial minerals to the USA. Just a few of the suggestions from Mike as to how we should respond to these tariffs. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. We'll begin rant or rave with Jersey Bill. Afternoon, Billy.
Yes, hello. Well, of course, I'm not too happy about what's happening there, but I want to put it more in a political context, and it's interesting that Mr. Drewe saw that as something that might occur because Mr. Trump keeps talking about it, and of course the whole thing about Canada becoming a 51st state is that you would lose representation if you were part of the United States House of Representatives and the Senate, and that's the whole thing. He doesn't, and you can see what's happening with the Congress right now. He doesn't want to have anybody being against him. He's got his Republican buddies all cowed. Who knows what kind of deals he's going to cut with some Democrats if things get a little close that way. But that's the only way we're going to solve this, by the Democrats taking over one or both houses of the Congress next time. He needs an opposition, and he doesn't have any, and that's going to allow him to act like a dictator. Just one other thing. Once again, you've got Miss Crombie and Mr. Schreiner, and of course the NDP leader as well. They're all out there saying about the same thing, and they're all running candidates each against each other. They're going to lose to the Conservative. They probably should lose big, and maybe then they'll decide to get together and form some sort of something that will allow them to run single candidates. They'll stand a better chance of beating Conservatives. But that's the thing. Conservatives seems to have a way of winning elections and then pushing their will on the people, and I'm finding it really, really hard to take.
All right, Billy, appreciate the call. A call also to unite the political left in this country. Remember all the talk about uniting the right? Well, Conservatives are certainly having their day, that is for sure. Matthew, rant or rave, good afternoon.
Hi there, Mike. I'm going to be ranting, and I'm going to be continuing on with this situation with the Canada-U.S. situation that's been going on. And obviously, we're hearing in the last few days a lot of people talk about how they don't want to buy stuff from the U.S. and that they don't want to go to the U.S. anymore and stuff like that. But if there is something that has been grossly overlooked by people, I'm going to bring it up and say it, because there's got to be more than just what people are saying about buying stuff that's American or not going to American stores or whatever. And that is in regards to the fact that in recent years, we've allowed the United States to basically control how we do our society and our history. And if we're truly going to be united against the United States, we need to begin the process of healing in terms of restoring our culture and history. And I know that there are going to be some people who are not going to like this suggestion, but it is a necessary one. And that is, we need to restore every statue, monument, and memorial that has been torn down in recent years in order to place the United States, because it's our society, it's our history, it's not theirs, and they do not have a right to decide and control what is a part of our society, what is a part of our history. And if we are genuine and sincere about being united against the United States, then we cannot continue to placate them, because placation only leads to destruction, Mike. There is no other outcome.
All right, Matthew, I appreciate the phone call. I don't know that it was the United States or the influence of the United States that led to the removal of statues and other monuments here in Canada. However, I am open to Matthew's idea here that what we need is a redefinition of, or a reminder of, the definition of what it is to be Canadian, or what it is that makes us Canadian. Somebody shared with me just yesterday that I Am Canadian rant. That was a beer company commercial many years ago. I am Joe, and I am Canadian. And maybe, just maybe, we need a little bit of that moxie as we enter into this pointless trade war that, I will remind you again, nobody wins. It's Rant or Rave, your 12 o'clock talkback hour this afternoon on the Mike Farwell Show, where you get your thoughts off your chest and onto the air. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It's Monday. That makes it the Rant or Rave edition of your 12 o'clock talkback hour. Right back to the phones. Alex, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I don't know if you've heard or not, but the United States has just dropped the tariffs on Mexico.
Yes.
Right. And why did they do that?
Because they wanted to.
No.
The wind changed direction.
No, because Mexico agreed to police their border.
Well, so did we. We're putting $1 billion into it. Is that not good enough?
It's not up to me, sir. It's up to the United States government.
Okay.
So whatever's good enough for them is what we need to do.
You really want to just, capitulate? Really? You? That surprises me coming from you, Alex.
Well, you don't know me, obviously.
Well, I know, not extremely well, but I know you enough from your calls over the years, and you don't strike me as the kind of person that backs down. I'm very surprised that you want, yes, Mr. Trump, can I roll out the red carpet? Would you like some marshmallows, sir? That doesn't sound like the Alex I know.
Well, you have no idea who I am.
Okay, well, I think you're wrong. I don't, listen, we've strengthened, we've put that $1 billion in. Maybe Mexico's putting $10 billion in. I don't know. But I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I'm just going to bow to every single demand that you make. Right? Oh, yeah, yes, Mr. Trump, whatever you say, Mr. Trump. I've got a little more backbone than that. But that's just me. Francis, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. First of all, I'd like to say nobody should be booing anybody at any of the hockey games or any other games. That's not right.
You're darn tootin'. Booing the national anthem is goofy.
Yes, but to get down, what they were talking about, the roll-up rim of Tim Hortons.
Yes.
Tim Hortons is a buddy of Trump's. Why not boycott today and tomorrow Tim Hortons and buy nothing there? And just
wait, how is Tim Hortons a buddy of Donald Trump's?
Yes.
How so? I didn't know Tim Hortons was a buddy of Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah. He was right at his table down in the celebrations and stuff.
Tim Horton?
Yes.
Francis,
One of the Hardens down there. Buddy with them.
All right. Okay. Just go play Roll Up the Rim to Win if you want to try to win a donut or something. I don't know. And don't, stop dissing the coffee. It's fine. Is it the best coffee you're ever going to drink? No. Is it just fine for $2.50 or whatever it costs a cup? Yes, it is. If you're paying more than that for a cup of coffee, you better really just rethink your budget, okay? You spend your money how you want. Paul, I'm done pontificating for now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I think somebody may be a little confused between Tim Hortons and that fella from out in Brantford.
What in Brantford? Sorry?
The fella out in Brantford.
Oh,
Gretzky.
Wayne Gretzky. Yes. Thank you.
Be
I got it now. You're right. You're very well done. I was trying to figure it out because Tim Horton, by the way, is dead, just for the record.
Yeah, it crashed on the QEW in a Pantera at 140 miles per hour.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
I thought it was a Corvette. Anyway.
No, it was Pantera.
All right.
I'm a little older than you, so my memory's a little bit better. Hey, listen. We all know that Trump wants to try and take over Canada. Can we agree on that?
I think he's at least signaling that he would like to. Yes.
He would like to do that.
Okay.
So here's what his plans are. He knows that we have an election coming up. There's there's no way, even if we made it through till October, he knows there's going to be an election coming up soon. So he says, I'm going to put all these tariffs on, 25% tariffs, and if you retaliate, I'm going to put even more on. Moron? No,
I heard that. Did you just call me a moron or Donald Trump a moron?
He's a moron.
Okay.
He figures he's going to put these tariffs on and threaten with more tariffs if we retaliate. And then, like I say, he knows there's an election coming. He's going to back off on the tariffs and give our illustrious leader, Justin Trudeau, a win in hopes that everybody will vote Liberal, because then he'll just have another puppet in there that he can just walk all over. He's planning this out so that the Liberals will maintain power and he can just walk all over them and take over Canada. And, it could well work. Generally speaking, Canadians aren't that dumb. But look what we've done for the last 9 years.
Okay. I don't think that's the case. Although you may sound like someone who's a little concerned with recent polling that shows quite the bump for the federal Liberals now that they're into a leadership campaign. I don't know. But really, a master plan on the part of Trump to get a Liberal reelected so he can walk all over Canada? No. Perish the thought, Paul. Pat, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I have just a comment with respect to the tariffs.
Sure.
I'm upset about the tariffs, but I'm upset less so at Trump than at our own federal government. I think there's a 0% chance that Canada wins a trade war. Our exports to the U.S. are worth roughly 20% of our GDP. And by contrast, American exports to Canada and Mexico combined are worth just 3% of their GDP. And so we're not going to win any trade war. And unfortunately, for the last 9 years, our progressive government has forced Canadian capital investment to chase ideas related to ESG investments. For those that don't know what ESG stands for, it's environmental social governance. And so this is in contrast to capital chasing productive ideas such as natural resource development or capital expenditures to sell to countries other than the U.S. And so really, instead of building pipelines and developing mines, we're investing in social justice motivated investments. And as a result, we've increased our regulations, we've increased our bureaucracy, we've increased our taxes, and instead of making Canada more competitive, we're making it less competitive. And this is really why our standard of living as Canadians in 2025 is the same today as it's been in 2016. And so we're really vulnerable to this trade war. And unfortunately, the progressive left has made Canadians poorer and less competitive. Thank you.
Thanks for the call, Pat. Very well read. I think it might be a bit of an oversimplification when it comes to our investments, our goals, and what that has done to the economy generally. Although I think there is some merit in what you're talking about, certainly when it comes to our lack of productivity, our lack of investment in innovation, etc. To the point on the trade war, though, again, I'll just say, because you said you don't think there's any way Canada wins this trade war. I don't think there is a winner in a trade war, but that's just me. We continue taking your calls on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. It's the Rant or Rave edition on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. And right back to the phones for more of your rants or raves on this Talkback Hour this Monday afternoon. A couple of Toms on the line. Start with this Tom. Good afternoon, Tom.
Hi, welcome back, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, just a couple things there. At first, I don't know if you're aware of the incident out in Brantford with the 99 hockey team out there with the young fellas.
And the young fella's been picked up by a team in Oxford County, and I'm working on getting the president of that hockey association on the show. We're just confirming a time to talk about, because what happened to Tavin is just awful.
I understand. Okay, there has to be a code of conduct, and I'm not sure why, when it was first found out this was going on, that the player or players were not suspended, and why the coaches weren't suspended or removed from the team at that point. To me, that's where it should have. As a coach, and I've had to sign a code of conduct, and I'm responsible for my team's actions and my players. And to let this go on as far as it did, I'm so really surprised. I'm glad for the young player that he was picked somewhere else, and I'm also glad that he's enjoying the game of hockey again, which is what it is. You're supposed to be out there having fun. You're not supposed to be concerned about players out there trying to take your head off of a slap shot.
I agree.
My second point is that with everything's going on with tariffs and that, and I was surprised I got on, is that Mr. Trump's going to try to play two people against, or everybody against each other. It's more than just, to me, and it seems more and more, it's going to be something else again. If it's not going to be the border, it's going to be about banking institutions. If it's not going to be about banking institutions, it's about something else. And we've come up, we've sort of not, we haven't really drawn a line in the sand, but I think we've actually shown that we're willing to do certain things. So I don't think we can walk back from this after this. Like, whether or not it gets resolved, we have to look at how we do business differently. And we do, we've lost respect for one of our biggest allies, and that should not be deniable. But I also believe too that the other side is, if you're going to go to a game, which is an NHL game, a Raptor game, or a Blue Jay game this year, don't boo the national anthem. Show a little more respect.
Absolutely agree on that last point. We'll get to an update from the 570 News Center and come back with more rants or raves on this Talkback Hour on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio. Every Monday, the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour is the Rant or Rave edition. We continue. Mayor Jake, good afternoon.
Mike, how are you now?
I'm good, and you?
Oh, not so bad. I got a rant or rave for you.
All right.
My rave is the Sunset Grill on Iron Needles, just in the Sobeys there. That place, every time I go there with my wife and my little guy on Sundays, they are always super respectful. Service is always great. Food's always amazing. So hats off to them. They always do a wonderful job. Even when it's super busy, the service is just snap and it's amazing. My rant is, if I ran for premier, I know for a fact I would absolutely wipe the floor with the Conservatives, Liberals, Green Party, and the NDP. I would run as a independent. I would only spend money on things that we absolutely need: healthcare, schools, nurses, so on and so forth. I wouldn't waste any money. Wouldn't spend anything on any spas or any carbon tax stuff. It would be going straight to things that we absolutely need.
Mayor Jake, I like the sounds of the platform as a potential independent in this provincial election. We are only going to spend on what we need. It's the needs before the wants. That's budgeting 101 right there. I like the sounds of it. Kyle, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Big rave to this big Canadian radio station by Canadian host Mike Farwell.
Thank you very much. All right. Good Canadian guy right there. Let me tell you, Kyle.
And I just got a question for you.
Okay.
Because of this whole tariff thing, is that going to affect the OHL in purchasing or finding a team because of what's going on?
No, stop it. No.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure.
Well, I honestly, I have no idea, to be honest with you. Who does really know? It's like 300 pages of crap that we have to think about now and sift through on tariffs.
Well, there's only things that we have to worry about, and those are the four most main things that we Canadians should always spend money on: Nanaimo bars, craft dinner by Canadian made only, Canadian beer, and Canadian whiskey. Am I not correct, or am I correct, my friend?
You're pretty close. You're pretty close. Although, forgive me for saying this, but I do not care for the Nanaimo bar at all. The only thing I like about Nanaimo bars is one of my best friends has trouble pronouncing Nanaimo bars, so we get to tease him about it and have him here say Nanaimo, Monino, all these different pronunciations of Nanaimo bar. Don't care for them at all. Butter tarts, on the other hand, which some kind-hearted listener brought me this morning as a welcome back gift, all the way from Dudu's Bakery in Baileyboro. Very much appreciated. And yes to Canadian beer. Absolutely. I'll just leave it there. Jason, you're on the Talkback Hour. Rant or rave?
Mikhail, how are you?
Jay, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
I agree. I'm not a big Nanaimo guy. There's something about them.
It's the coconut is what it is. That's the problem with it. Yeah.
And I like coconut, though, but I don't know.
Okay.
Anyways,
yeah.
Back in 2000, we realized how little or how much we depend on imports from the rest of the world. The original blue masks that were coming in, or maybe the N95s, were coming from Wuhan, China. Luckily, we make our own masks in the country. But I think, COVID should have taught us that we have to actually start building stuff here for us to buy. And we didn't learn anything from that point in time. I'm not sure if we'll learn anything at this point in time. Whenever the tariffs are lifted, we have to start manufacturing goods in Canada like we once did and selling to ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to end up in every 10 or 15 years, not having the stuff that we actually need. We need to build greenhouses out in the middle of instead of selling off our green spaces, let's build greenhouses and plant the stuff that we need there all year round, that we don't have to get strawberries from Mexico or the United States in the wintertime.
Listen, Jason, I hear where you're coming from, and I absolutely appreciate the sentiment. Let me say this, and I'll grant you, I'm trying to catch up as best I can, and I'm no economist, but among the analyses that I read this weekend coming home from our hockey trip was one that took us back to the original free trade agreement. And I'm old enough to remember that this was not a universally popular thing negotiated between then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney and then U.S. President Ronald Reagan. But among the readings that I did, it was pointed out that middle-class North Americans did incredibly well financially as a result of the free trade agreement. Incredibly well. And, of course, we all know how middle-class Canadians, if there is such a thing anymore, are doing these days. But the other thing that strikes me is that the original free trade agreement between Canada and the United States was negotiated between a conservative prime minister in Mulroney and a conservative or Republican president in Ronald Reagan. And it just goes to show how 40 years later, the political sands have shifted, because we've got a Republican who you would think then is in favor of free and open trade and the economic benefits thereof. But instead, Donald Trump seems to be in favor of anything but free and open trade between his neighbor across the border. I find it fascinating. So, I get where Jason is coming from, and I've heard all of these things about buying Canadian and building up our own industry. And the other thing that I read, and I'm pretty confident in, is that much like there is no winner in a trade war, protectionism is not a solid economic plan, right? In theory, I get where you're coming from. I like to buy local and shop local too. But as an economic principle, protectionism ain't it. So I don't know. That's my limited knowledge of this. That's where I'm at today. But I want to hear where you're at. That's why we open the phone lines from noon until 1. It's your 12 o'clock Talkback Hour, rant or rave edition here on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. 519-570-2545. Star 570 by cell or long distance toll free at 1-800-570-5715. It's the rant or rave edition of your 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. Tom, good afternoon.
Yes, I don't blame Trump. I blame our government and the premier. We should have had better international economic prosperity with other nations, but we depended on them. And the reason I blame the premiers is because we have more distances and more, we can't do trade with them. Now, the ultimate goal of Trump is not to put taxes, but to destroy the Canadian economic so we can join them. That's the ultimate. And as long as we talk about Mulroney and Reagan, it's all garbage. Got nothing to do. This is what the guy wants. He wants to take over the country.
You really think so, eh?
That's what he said.
Okay. Well, yeah, he said it, but and in fairness, he has said other things and followed through on them. So I'm maybe I should be more worried than I am about becoming a 51st state, but I'm not yet. I think that Donald Trump is, well, here's another analysis I read that holds some water with me, that we are being used here as a bit of a prop on the part of the U.S. administration. And Donald Trump is basically saying, hey, if I can do this to my closest ally, I can do this to you. And no matter the outcome of this trade war that is about to begin tomorrow, Donald Trump will find a way to declare victory, and his base will eat it up because they just take everything he says as gospel. And so he'll be the victor, and he, took advantage of or bullied an ally into submission. And then the rest of the world will be on notice that Donald Trump means business, because if he can do it to his closest ally, he'll do it to you too. I think that's another interesting way to look at all of this. Christine, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Christine from Guelph, and my question for Mike, it goes back on what they were talking about earlier, but with all these music artists, who would you have watched them on TV, Jay Leno or David Letterman? Because I was thinking back, I remember Madonna, she was up on Letterman's desk and took her top off on TV.
I don't know where that call came from or that recollection. It's not wrong, none of it, but we have not talked, except during the Farwell Show 5 at the beginning of the show today, about music, because last night was the Grammys, and we talked about Beyonce's album Cowboy Carter winning Album of the Year. Other than that, we haven't even talked about music. But if you want to know, I was a Johnny Carson guy because I'm that old. And then I wanted to like Leno. I really did. And I mean, I don't dislike Leno, but I was much more a Letterman guy. I had a tradition with Letterman on Thanksgiving when he'd call his mom and guess what kind of pie she was making, and stupid pet tricks and top 10 lists. I was always more of a Letterman guy, not just because Madonna crawled onto his desk. Okay, we'll continue with what we had been talking about. Afif, good afternoon. Oh, my goodness. Afif.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm waiting for you. I've been calling you.
Yeah, I know. I'm just at Costco doing an order. So now mine isn't about tariffs. It's more confusion rather than rent or rave.
It's confusion?
Yes.
Okay, what are you confused about?
Do you know the three cameras, the school cameras?
Oh, the speed.
Like there's one on Victoria, there's one on Eastway, and then there's one another area.
Yes, I know the speed cameras. Well, you see, Afif, they're going to rotate them around to different locations in the region.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's
see
why.
what happens there? They're tricking you.
I just thought they were like, they're just gone forever. I was like, perfect.
No, you wish they were gone forever. They're not gone forever, my friend.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. That was my big thing.
You're welcome. Listen, I'm here to help as best I can. And by the way, dear region of Waterloo, enough with the speed cameras. Just stop it, would you? Or at minimum, just give me this. Keep them on during school hours. The rest of the time, camera off. Lenses off. Scott, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
Excellent. I have so much to say here. I'm probably going to get torn off one way or the other, but it terrifies me, and it blows my mind about how Canadians, Trump this and Trump that. How can he do this stuff? How can he do this stuff? Why we've spent the last 10 or how many years in Canada here of being politically correct and choosing to give away instead of creating a strong economy and building within, buying within, and everything. And as soon as some sort of difference comes up between our country and the U.S., you've crapped all over the U.S. at times too, Mike. And now everybody's the U.S. this, the U.S. that, Trump this, Trump that. His job is to look after his country. We've chosen a different route, and look where we're at. So buckle up and suit in, and you can't have everything and pay for everything and give everything away. And look where you're at.
All right, Scott. I appreciate the call. I think it's a little bit of a simplistic point of view on it, but I get it. And I want to be clear here. I don't think I have ever. I mean, you can challenge me on it and bring back, the receipts, so to speak, but I love America. I've crapped on Cleveland and Buffalo, but who hasn't? Come on. But I love the United States. I've got tickets to a hockey game coming up. I got tickets to a concert coming up, and I'm not changing my plans. But here's the thing, to what you're saying. Again, I think it's a little bit on the simplistic side, but there's no question in my mind that we are seen as weak, certainly by Donald Trump and the United States administration. I would hazard to guess we are seen as weak in other parts of the world currently, maybe for the last 10 years. I don't know. But when you have perceived weaknesses and somebody else has the strength and likes to wield that strength as power, this is what happens, right? I think it's fair to say we are being bullied. So what I would ask then in return is, what is the best approach to dealing with a bully? I mean, I'm not a fan of just, taking it from the bully and saying, thank you very much, do you want some more? I think you stand up to a bully. Show him what's what. And that's what I would hope we do. And in fact, it pleases me that we are moving in that direction. So that's where I'm at on it. But if I've crapped on the United States, I can't remember the time that I did, other than Cleveland and Buffalo. This is the Mike Farwell Show, your 12 o'clock Talkback Hour, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I'm sorry I got so confused with Christine's phone call a moment ago about Madonna and David Letterman and Jay Leno and music. And I said, well, I talked about music because of the Grammys during the Farwell Show 5 at the beginning of the show. Of course, we did This Week in Music History. We do it every Monday. We do. I guess I forget quickly. But we didn't talk about Madonna. That's why I got confused. And Madonna's infamous interview with David Letterman, she did not take off her top. That was Drew Barrymore that did that. And Madonna was the one that dropped the F-bomb. And it wasn't This Week in Music History. It was like in October back in 2005. So I'm sorry, Christine. I got confused. I didn't know where you were going with that or where you came from. But I'm catching up ever so slowly as we wind down another show. But This Week in Music History, and I was probably, just too focused on Fleetwood Mac, one of my favorite bands that was featured on This Week in Music History today. Every Monday at 11. I hope you'll enjoy it. And I won't get confused next week when Christine calls and talks about Madonna dropping F-bombs or crawling on desks with her top off. Grant, you get the last 30 seconds today. Make good use of them. Okay.
Yep. Maybe you'll know this. I'm going to throw it out to you. there was an old NHL player that scored 5 goals. He was drunk way back in the day, and to those yahoos that booed the national anthem, I think I would have went out to the ice to cheer on the American anthem and to make them feel, the people that were booing it, make them feel guilty.
That's a good idea. You should not boo the anthem. It's not the Americans' fault. It's their president's fault. And I'm sorry, I do not remember the NHL player who scored 5 goals while drunk, but I would hazard a guess that there was more than one. All right, that's all the time we have for the show today. Really appreciate you being a part of it. Love the interaction. Let's do it again tomorrow, okay? I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 if you will. Rob Snow and Now You Know is coming up until 3. My name is Mike Farwell.